sold as a pleasure animal to a middle-aged man, but he chose to make her his wife. The auction house smelled of sweat, stale liquor, and despair. Rows of cages lined the dimly lit chamber, filled with trembling creatures, most of them alien women taken from collapsed colonies or slave raids. They were given collars, tags, and degrading titles. The announcer's voice cracked through the crowd of bidders. Lot 21. A fine specimen, exotic features, flawless skin. Classified as a pleasure animal. Starting bid, 200 credits. From the corner cage, she clutched the iron bars, wide golden eyes staring out into the blur of drunken faces. Her body trembled, thin from days without food, her clothes little more than rags. She was not an animal. She had a name once, a family, a homeland, but all of that had been stripped from her. Now she was only a commodity. The bidding started. Men laughed, shouted numbers, and smirked at her fear. But in the back of the room, a man stood still. He was older than most of the bidders, streaks of gray in his beard, his clothes plain and worn. His name was Jonas Hale. He had not come to the auction to buy flesh. He hated this place, but he was searching for someone, anyone, to take away from this misery, even if it cost him everything. 300, a fat man shouted. 350, someone else jeered. Jonas raised his hand. 500. The hall fell silent for a moment. His voice was calm, steady, unhurried. The auctioneer's eyes widened. 500 credits. Do I hear 6? The room buzzed, but no one raised a hand. The bidders turned sour. No profit in outbidding a man who didn't even look interested in the pleasures she was meant to provide. Sold. The gavel slammed. To the gentleman in the back. They shoved her into his arms, still chained and trembling. She expected his touch to be rough, his eyes hungry like the others. But Jonas only draped his coat around her bare shoulders. You're safe now, he whispered, voice deep with kindness she had not heard in years. No one will hurt you here. Jonas lived on the edge of town, far from the filth of the market. His home was small but warm, a stone cottage with a wood stove that never went out. He brought her inside, offered her clean water, and set a plate of food before her. She stared at the bread and stew, unsure if it was a trick. Eat, he urged softly. You need it more than I do. Her hands shook as she picked up the spoon. The first bite burned her tongue. She had forgotten what real food tasted like. Tears welled in her eyes as she devoured the meal. Jonas said nothing, only poured her more water and made sure the fire kept her warm. When she finished, he unlocked her collar and chains. The heavy metal clattered to the floor, leaving red marks on her neck and wrists. She flinched, waiting for punishment. But Jonas only looked at her with gentle eyes. You're free here. You don't owe me anything. Her voice cracked, hoarse from disuse. Why did you buy me? He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. Because I couldn't stand to see them treat you that way. No one should live as property. She hugged herself tightly. But I was sold as a pleasure animal. The word made her stomach twist with shame. Jonas's jaw tightened. That's what they called you. But I don't see an animal. I see a woman who's been through hell. And I won't treat you like anything less. She stared at him in disbelief. No man had ever spoken to her like that, not since her capture. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, she began to heal. Jonas gave her space, never forcing her to speak of her past. He let her sleep as long as she wished, taught her how to tend the garden, and even showed her the small library of old books he kept. At first, she moved like a shadow, silent, careful, as if afraid of angering him. But his patience chipped away at her fear. She began to smile again, softly at first, then more freely. She told him her name at last, Lyra. He repeated it with reverence, as if it were a treasure. Lyra. That's a beautiful name. The sound of it on his lips warmed her chest. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, she found herself sitting close to him by the fire. Jonas was mending an old coat, his hands steady despite the years. "You live alone," she said softly. He nodded. "My wife passed away many winters ago. We had no children. Since then, it's just been me." Lyra hesitated. "And now me." Jonas looked at her, meeting her golden eyes with a steady kindness. "Yes. Now you." It wasn't romance at first. It was survival, then trust, then friendship. But as the months passed, something deeper bloomed between them. One night, after sharing stories of her childhood before the raids, Lyra broke down, weeping into her hands. Jonas wrapped his arms around her carefully, letting her cry against his chest. She expected him to let go quickly, but he held her for as long as she needed, his warmth steady, his presence safe. "Lyra," he whispered, "you're not broken. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." She lifted her head, eyes shimmering with tears. "Why do you care so much? I'm nothing." "No," his voice was firm now, almost fierce. "You're not nothing. You're everything." Something shifted between them in that moment. Lyra's heart raced, not with fear, but with a new, fragile hope. Spring came, and with it life. The garden bloomed, and so did their bond. They laughed more easily, worked side by side, and shared quiet meals like a family. One evening, Jonas brought her a small wooden box. Inside was a silver band, simple but polished with care. "I know I bought you," he said, voice trembling, "but I never wanted ownership. I only wanted you safe. Lyra, will you marry me? Not as property, not as debt, but as my equal, my partner, my wife." Lyra's breath caught. The word wife felt like a miracle, something stolen from her dreams long ago. She touched the ring with trembling fingers. "You would truly want me as your wife?" "I already do," he said softly. "You've given me back life I thought was gone forever. If you'll have me, Lyra, I'll spend every day proving you're loved." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they were no longer from sorrow. She threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "Yes," she whispered against his chest. "Yes, I will." They married quietly under the blossoming trees, with only the wind and the birds as witnesses. Lyra wore a dress Jonas had sewn from soft linen, and he placed the silver band on her finger with trembling hands. For the first time since her capture, she felt whole again. Not a slave, not a commodity, not an animal, but a woman, loved and chosen. And Jonas, once a lonely widower, found in her a second chance at life. Together, they built something stronger than the chains that had once bound her. A home, a marriage, a love born not of possession, but of freedom. And though the world outside still dealt in cruelty and despair, within their little cottage, hope bloomed eternal.